The haunted dog. At the edge of a village, there was a dense forest. In the middle of it stood an old, abandoned house that everyone called the haunted house. No one dared to go near it because eerie sounds were heard at night, sometimes someone crying and other times the howling of a dog. One night, 4 friends from the village decided to uncover the truth about the house. They armed themselves with flashlights and sticks and headed into the dark. As they approached the house, a chilly wind began to blow. Outside the house, they saw a large black dog sitting still. Its glowing red eyes and dark, shaggy coat sent chills down their spines. "It's just a dog," said Raju, the bravest among them. He stepped forward to touch it, but as soon as he did, the dog vanished into thin air. The group was terrified but decided to continue inside. Inside the house, there was an eerie silence. The wooden floor creaked under their footsteps. Suddenly, the same dog appeared in front of them. This time, it was floating in the air, growling menacingly as its glowing eyes bore into them. "This dog is a ghost." Ramesh screamed and tried to run, but the door slammed shut on its own. The dog slowly advanced toward them. Suddenly, an old man's voice echoed through the room, "Why have you come here?" The friends turned to see a faint, shadowy figure standing behind the dog. The man explained that he and his dog used to live in the house. One day, thieves set the house on fire, killing both of them. Since then, their souls had been trapped in the house. "You need not be afraid," the old man continued. "If you light a lamp near this house and pray for our souls, we can finally be free." Terrified but determined, the friends returned to the village. The next day, they came back with the villagers, lit a lamp outside the house, and prayed for the man and his dog. From that day onward, no strange sounds were heard from the house, and the dog was never seen again. But, sometimes, on dark, quiet nights, villagers still hear the faint howling of a dog from the forest, as if it's trying to say something. Would you dare to visit that house? Here's an alternate and final part of the story in English. The Dog's Revenge. The friends were terrified by the old man's revelation but felt pity for him and his dog. They promised to return the next day to help release their souls. As they left the house that night, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The next day, the 4 friends lit a lamp and prayed near the house, just as the old man had instructed. However, as they were leaving, one of them, Mohan, mockingly said, "Ghosts don't exist. That old man was probably just a trick of our imagination." That night, strange things began to happen in the village. Mohan's dog started barking uncontrollably at nothing. His neighbors reported hearing the growls of a large dog outside their homes. By midnight, Mohan heard scratching at his door. He opened it to find the same glowing-eyed dog sitting there, its growl low and threatening. Terrified, Mohan ran to the village temple. He begged for forgiveness, crying out, "I didn't mean to insult you. Please, leave me alone." The dog appeared again, but this time, its growls seemed less menacing. Slowly, the dog faded away into the night. The next morning, the villagers returned to the haunted house to light more lamps and pray once again. This time, the house shook as if in a storm, and a faint voice echoed, "We are free now." The house collapsed that very moment, leaving nothing but a pile of rubble. From that day on, the villagers no longer feared the forest or the house. But they always warned their children, respect the unseen, for not all spirits forgive so easily. The end. The Echoes of Ashen Hollow. Chapter 1. The Whispering Invitation. A group of 4 friends, Amy, Jack, Clara, and Ethan, find an ancient map while exploring an old bookstore. The map leads to Ashen Hollow, a secluded, crumbling ruin deep in the woods. Legends about the hollow speak of vanishing villagers and an eternal curse. Despite warnings from locals, the group decides to investigate, driven by curiosity and the promise of hidden treasures. The journey to the hollow begins, with strange occurrences along the way, whispering winds, distorted shadows, and missing items. They finally arrive at the ruins, where an eerie silence envelops them. The first sign of trouble appears. The map begins to change, marking areas within the hollow that weren't there before. A haunting melody echoes faintly, luring them deeper into the ruins. Chapter 2. The Shadowed Courtyard. The group explores the hollow's courtyard, overgrown with twisted vines and scattered with broken statues. Clara finds a strange diary buried under rubble, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and warnings. Ethan begins to experience déjà vu, claiming he's dreamt of the hollow before. Night falls unexpectedly early, plunging the ruins into darkness. The group discovers glowing symbols etched into the walls, pulsating as if alive. Amy begins hearing her name whispered from the shadows, but no one else notices. Jack suggests leaving, but the entrance to the hollow disappears behind a wall of stone. The group finds themselves trapped, with the temperature dropping rapidly. Chapter 3. The Silent Chambers. They venture into the hollow's inner chambers, discovering ancient artifacts and bones scattered across the floor. Clara deciphers parts of the diary, warning about the Watcher, Who guards the hollow? Ethan discovers a room filled with mirrors that reflect distorted versions of the group. One mirror cracks, and Amy sees her reflection smile maliciously before vanishing. Strange claw marks appear on the walls, growing longer and deeper as they proceed. Jack begins to grow paranoid, accusing the others of hiding something. The group finds an ancient altar with a chalice filled with dark liquid. Clara spills the liquid accidentally, causing the ground to quake violently. Chapter 4: The Vanishing. Jack disappears without a trace during the quake, leaving only his flashlight behind. The remaining group searches desperately but finds no sign of him. Amy becomes convinced they're being watched, her fear escalating. Clara discovers a hidden passage beneath the altar, leading to deeper catacombs. The passage is filled with chilling whispers that grow louder the further they descend. Ethan begins speaking in a language he doesn't understand, his eyes glazed over. Amy realizes the symbols from the diary are appearing on their skin. Clara connects the symbols to a ritual described in the diary, but she's unsure if it's for protection or a curse. Chapter 5: The Watcher's Domain. They enter a massive underground chamber lit by an unnatural blue glow. The room is filled with skeletal remains, all posed as if shielding themselves. At the center stands a towering figure cloaked in shadows, the Watcher. The Watcher speaks in riddles, accusing them of awakening something ancient. Ethan collapses, convulsing as the symbols on his body begin to burn. Clara confronts the Watcher, demanding answers, but it only laughs. The group attempts to flee but finds themselves running in circles. Amy begins to lose her grip on reality, seeing visions of Jack calling for help. Chapter 6: The Bargain. Clara deciphers the diary's final warning: sacrifice or surrender. The group realizes they must make a choice to appease the Watcher and escape. Ethan grows weaker, his condition worsening as the symbols consume him. Amy finds an ancient blade with inscriptions hinting at a sacrificial ritual. Clara tries to reason with the Watcher, offering the blade as a symbol of peace. The Watcher demands a life in exchange for the group's freedom. Ethan volunteers, claiming he's already marked for death. The group reluctantly agrees, and Ethan steps forward. Chapter 7: The Ritual. Ethan performs the ritual under Clara's guidance, reciting words from the diary. The Watcher's presence grows stronger, the chamber trembling with its power. Amy tries to intervene, believing there must be another way, but Clara stops her. The ritual completes, and Ethan's body disintegrates into ash. The chamber collapses, forcing Amy and Clara to flee. They find themselves back in the courtyard, but it looks different, fresher, untouched by time. Jack reappears, confused but unharmed, claiming no time had passed. The group notices the diary and map have vanished. Chapter 8: The Eternal Echo. The group escapes the hollow, but they feel a lingering presence watching them. Back in town, locals claim Ashen Hollow has never existed. Clara notices the symbols have disappeared, but a faint scar remains where they once were. Amy begins hearing whispers in her sleep, hinting that the Watcher is not finished with her. Ethan's voice echoes in her mind, warning her to stay away from the ruins. Clara discovers the blade in her bag, untouched and gleaming ominously. Jack begins to act strangely, his behavior mirroring Ethan's before the ritual. The story ends with Amy receiving another map, this time marked with her own name. The Whispering Ruins. Deep within the dense forest of Sundarban lay an abandoned house known among locals as Kudum Haveli. The house was said to have been built centuries ago by a wealthy merchant who mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind whispers of jinns and curses. Muslims in nearby villages avoided the area, especially after sunset, reciting Ayat ul-Kursi whenever they ventured close. One evening, a group of university friends, Zain, Amir, Nadia, and Fatima, decided to visit the house as part of their paranormal investigation project. All were practicing Muslims, but curiosity got the better of them. They packed their essentials, including copies of the Quran and miswaks, wooden toothbrushes, and headed into the jungle. As they approached the ruins, the air grew heavier, and the sun sank behind the towering trees. The house was a haunting sight, its walls cracked, windows shattered, and a faint, eerie hum emanating from within. Zain, the bravest of the group, whispered, "Let's not forget to recite Bismillah before stepping inside." The moment they entered, the air turned icy cold. Fatima felt a sharp tug on her hijab, though no one was near her. Amir noticed strange symbols etched into the walls, resembling ancient Arabic script. Nadia, clutching her tasbih, murmured, "Stay together. Don't let fear overpower us. Remember Allah is with us." Suddenly, a deep voice echoed through the house, "Leave, this is not your place." Startled but determined, Zain recited Surah al-Falaq aloud. The walls began to tremble, and shadows darted across the room. The friends huddled together, reciting verses from the Quran. The more they recited, the louder the wails from unseen entities became. Fatima then spotted an old, dusty book on a table. It was open to a page that mentioned a family who once lived there. They had been cursed by a jinn for desecrating a sacred grave. The curse would end only if someone prayed for forgiveness on behalf of the family. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the group decided to perform Salat ul-Tawbah, prayer for repentance, in the house. They spread their prayer mats, made wudu with a bottle of water they carried, and began their salah. As they prayed, the atmosphere shifted. The cold turned into warmth, and the oppressive aura began to lift. By the time they completed their prayers, the house had fallen silent. A faint, peaceful light filled the room. The friends heard a gentle voice, "Thank you. We are free now." They left the house just as dawn broke, their faith stronger than ever, knowing they had helped end a centuries-old curse. From that day on, Kudum Haveli became a place of peace, and villagers no longer feared it. The Whispering Ruins, Part 2. After their encounter at Kudum Haveli, Zain, Amir, Nadia, and Fatima returned to their university, believing the chapter of the haunted house was closed. However, strange occurrences began to follow them. Nadia was the first to notice. Late at night, she would hear faint whispers in Arabic coming from the corner of her room. At first, she dismissed it as her imagination, but the whispers grew louder. One night, she woke to find her Quran open on her desk, even though she was sure she had placed it on the shelf. The verse, indeed, "With hardship comes ease," Surah al-Inshirah, 94:6, was highlighted. Zain started having vivid dreams about the jungle. In these dreams, he would see a shadowy figure standing in the ruins, calling his name. Amir, on the other hand, began to experience unexplainable bouts of anger and frustration. He felt as if something was pressing down on his chest, especially during Fajr. Fatima, the most spiritually grounded of the group, remained unaffected, until one evening, when she found a charcoal-drawn symbol on the door of her dorm room. Realizing these events might be connected to their visit to Kudum Haveli, they regrouped. Amir, visibly disturbed, said, "I don't think the jinn we encountered were all freed. There might be something more, something left behind." Nadia added, "And it's following us. Whatever we did wasn't enough." Fatima suggested seeking help from an alim, Islamic scholar, in the nearby town. They visited Sheikh Ahmed, a well-known expert in Islamic exorcism, Ruqyah. After hearing their story, he grew serious. Sometimes, jinn attach themselves to humans who disturb their domain, even unintentionally. It seems one or more of them have followed you, but there's still hope. With Allah's help, we can break their hold. Sheikh Ahmed prepared a plan. He gave them bottles of water infused with Ruqya verses and told them to sprinkle it around their rooms and drink it regularly. He advised them to pray tahajjud every night and recite Surah al-Baqarah in their homes. That night, the group gathered at Nadia's dorm room. They began reciting Surah al-Baqarah together, their voices united. As they recited, the air in the room grew heavy, and a chilling wind blew out the candles. Shadows began to flicker across the walls, and the whispers returned, louder than ever. Sheikh Ahmed, who had joined them, continued reciting with unwavering faith. He raised his voice and commanded in Arabic, "Leave these servants of Allah. You have no power here." The shadows coalesced into a single form, a towering, dark figure with glowing red eyes. It roared, shaking the room, but the group didn't falter. They continued reciting, calling upon Allah for protection. With a final, ear-piercing scream, the figure disintegrated into nothingness. The room fell silent, and a sense of peace filled the air. Sheikh Ahmed turned to them and said, "It is over. Remember, your faith is your greatest shield. Never let fear overpower your trust in Allah." The group thanked Sheikh Ahmed and returned to their lives, stronger in their Iman faith. They vowed to share their experience to remind others of the unseen world and the importance of seeking Allah's protection. Qudam Haveli was never visited again, and the jungle grew quieter, as if the spirits that once haunted it had finally found peace. The Whispering Ruins, Part 3. Months had passed since the incident at Nadia's dorm, and life had seemingly returned to normal for the group. Zain, Amir, Nadia, and Fatima, now referred to by their university nicknames, Zach, Amir, Nora, and Faye, were back to focusing on their studies. However, the peace was short-lived. One evening, Zach received an anonymous email with the subject line, "Return to the ruins." Attached was a blurry image of the Qudam Haveli. The photograph looked recent, showing signs that someone, or something, had been there. "What is this?" Zach muttered as he forwarded the email to the group. Within minutes, Amir called. "You got this too, right?" His voice was tense. "It's happening again." Faye, who had always been the most composed, suggested they meet at the university library to discuss it. When they gathered, Nora revealed something even more unsettling. "I've been having nightmares again," she admitted. "But this time, it's not just the house. I see people, faces I don't recognize, trapped inside. They're calling for help." Amir frowned. "Maybe it's not over. Maybe we only dealt with part of the problem." Faye nodded. "We need to go back. But this time, we'll prepare properly." The group agreed reluctantly, knowing they had no other choice. With the help of Sheikh Ahmed, they armed themselves with additional Ruqya verses, taweez protective amulets, and spiritual advice. They spent the next few days praying, fasting, and mentally preparing for what lay ahead. The return to Qudam Haveli. Under a crescent moon, they ventured back into the dense jungle. The path seemed darker and more foreboding than before. As they approached the ruins, a strange sense of déjà vu overcame them. The house loomed ahead, more menacing than they remembered. Before entering, Faye recited Bismillah aloud. "Stick together this time. No wandering off." Inside, the house was eerily silent. The symbols on the walls had returned, glowing faintly in the dark. Nora gasped as she noticed something new. The same faces from her dreams were etched into the walls, their expressions frozen in terror. "Do you hear that?" Zach whispered. A faint crying echoed through the halls. The group followed the sound to a hidden staircase leading underground. "We never saw this before," Amir muttered. Descending cautiously, they found themselves in a cold, dimly lit chamber. At the center was a large, ancient seal inscribed with Quranic verses, partially broken. Around it were faded remnants of what appeared to be a sacrificial ritual. "This seal was holding something," Faye said, her voice trembling. "And it's no longer contained." Suddenly, the room shook violently. The broken seal began to glow, and a towering figure emerged from the shadows, a jinn far more powerful than anything they had encountered before. Its voice boomed, shaking the walls. "Foolish humans. You freed me once, and now you return. You will not leave alive." But the group was ready. Zach began reciting Surah al-Falaq, while Amir recited Surah al-Ikhlas. Nora and Faye joined in, their voices unwavering. The jinn roared, but every verse recited weakened it. Faye held up a bottle of Ruqya-infused water and splashed it onto the seal. The broken pieces began to repair themselves as if guided by an unseen force. The jinn screamed in rage, its form flickering and fading. "Keep going," Nora shouted, her hands trembling but her voice steady. With a final recitation of Ayat al-Kursi, the seal restored itself completely. The jinn let out one last, deafening scream before vanishing into thin air. The chamber fell silent, and a warm light filled the room. The aftermath. As they emerged from the ruins, the first rays of dawn broke through the trees. The jungle seemed lighter, more alive, as if a great weight had been lifted. Zach turned to the group. "It's over. For real this time." Faye smiled faintly. "It wasn't just us. Allah guided us through this." Back at the university, life returned to normal once again. The group decided to keep their experience mostly to themselves, sharing only what could help others understand the power of faith and the reality of the unseen world. The Qudam Haveli stood silent, finally at peace, as the jungle slowly reclaimed it. The Whispering Ruins, Part 4. Months after sealing the jinn back into the underground chamber of Qudam Haveli, Zach, Amir, Nora, and Faye thought their ordeal was behind them. Life had settled into routine. Exams were approaching, and the group spent most of their time in the university library, focusing on their studies. But the past has a way of catching up. One evening, Faye received a phone call from Sheikh Ahmed. His voice was heavy with concern. "Faye, I've been researching the symbols you described from Qudam Haveli. It appears they weren't just meant to trap a single entity. There's more to this than we realized." Faye's stomach churned. "What do you mean, Sheikh? I believe the jinn you encountered wasn't alone. The seal you repaired was only one of several across the region. These seals were placed centuries ago by a group of pious scholars to contain multiple jinn, bound by a pact to protect something, a powerful relic. If the seals continue to weaken, the consequences could be catastrophic." Faye immediately called the others. Within an hour, the group gathered in her apartment, their faces pale as she recounted the sheikh's words. Zach leaned forward. "If this is true, we need to act. But how do we even begin to find these other seals?" Nora, flipping through a notebook, paused. "Wait. Remember the map I found in the chamber? We dismissed it as old scribbles, but what if it wasn't?" Amir nodded. "If we can retrace our steps, maybe we can figure out where the other seals are." The hunt for the seals. With Sheikh Ahmed's guidance, the group began their search. The map from Qudam Haveli pointed to 3 other locations deep within the forest. Each spot was marked with an ancient symbol similar to the ones they had seen in the ruined house. Their first destination was an abandoned well, hidden beneath overgrown vines. As they approached, the air grew thick, and an unnatural chill surrounded them. Zack lit a lantern, revealing faint inscriptions around the well's edge. "This is it," Amir said, his voice barely above a whisper. They began reciting verses from the Quran. As their voices filled the clearing, the ground trembled. A shadowy figure emerged from the well, its form shifting and growing larger. It snarled, "You will not interfere with our domain." But the group stood firm, reciting Surah al-Baqarah. The figure roared and lunged toward them, but with every verse, it grew weaker until it dissolved into nothingness. The inscriptions around the well began to glow, signaling that the seal had been reinforced. The final confrontation. The second location was a crumbling minaret in the heart of the jungle, where they encountered another jinn, even more powerful than the last. Each battle tested their faith and courage, but with Sheikh Ahmed's guidance and their unwavering trust in Allah, they managed to restore the second seal as well. However, the third and final location, a forgotten mosque buried beneath the roots of an ancient tree, was different. As they arrived, they found the seal already broken. The air was thick with malice, and an ominous presence surrounded them. "This isn't like the others," Nora whispered. From the shadows emerged a jinn unlike any they had encountered before. Towering and engulfed in flames, it laughed mockingly. "You think your prayers can stop me? You are mere mortals." The ground beneath them cracked, and the group nearly lost their footing. But Faye stepped forward, her voice steady. "We are mortals, but we are servants of Allah, and you have no power against him." The group began reciting Ayat ul-Kursi in unison, their voices drowning out the jinn's roars. The battle was fierce, with the jinn hurling winds and shadows at them, but they pressed on. Zack, noticing the remains of the seal, grabbed the Ruqya-infused water and poured it over the broken pieces. As the seal began to repair itself, the jinn let out a final, ear-piercing scream and vanished in a burst of light. The tree roots parted, revealing the mosque's interior. Inside, they found a relic, a glowing artifact inscribed with Quranic verses. "This must be what the seals were protecting," Amir said, awe in his voice. A new purpose. The group returned the relic to Sheikh Ahmed, who ensured it was taken to a safe location. "You've done well," he told them. "But remember, the unseen world is vast, and there will always be forces at work. Never let your faith waver." Zack, Nora, Amir, and Faye knew their lives would never be the same. They had been thrust into a world few understood, and their bond, strengthened by their shared trials, would last a lifetime. And as they looked out at the horizon, they couldn't shake the feeling that their journey wasn't over. Somewhere, in the shadows of the unseen world, other challenges awaited. The Whispering Ruins, Part 5. Months had passed since the final battle beneath the ancient tree. Zack, Amir, Nora, and Faye had returned to their lives, their faith strengthened by the experiences they'd endured. Yet, the peaceful normalcy they had hoped for was short-lived. One quiet evening, as they gathered at Zack's apartment, the phone rang. It was Sheikh Ahmed. "I've learned something disturbing," his voice came through the line, strained. "The relic you uncovered was not just a physical object, it was a key. A key to unlocking a door that leads to a realm beyond this world." Zack's heart sank. "A key? To what?" "To a prison," Sheikh Ahmed replied gravely. "A prison where the most dangerous jinn have been kept for centuries. The seal you restored was only part of the puzzle. With the relic now in your possession, the gates to that realm may soon open unless we act quickly." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air as Zack turned to Amir, Nora, and Faye. They knew what this meant. Their journey was far from over. The return of the key. The next morning, the group met with Sheikh Ahmed to discuss their next move. The scholar explained that the relic, which had once been a simple artifact, was now imbued with immense power. Whoever controlled it had the ability to either reinforce the seals or shatter them completely. The key was not just for keeping jinn sealed away, it was also capable of unlocking the gates to their prison, releasing untold horrors into the world. You must destroy it, Sheikh Ahmed insisted. If the jinn escape, the balance between worlds will be shattered. It will be a catastrophe. But how do we destroy it? Faye asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. There is a place, far beyond the forest where you first encountered the jinn, a sacred valley known only to a few. There, you will find a fire, a flame that is said to burn away anything tainted by darkness. But be warned, getting there will not be easy. The Sacred Valley. Determined to prevent a disaster, the group set out on their journey to find the Sacred Valley. As they ventured deeper into the wilderness, the atmosphere grew more oppressive. The jungle seemed darker, as though even the trees sensed the impending danger. At the heart of the valley, they found a temple carved into the mountain itself. Inside, an ethereal flame burned, its light flickering like a beacon in the darkness. It was said to be the only fire capable of purifying cursed objects, and now it was their only hope. As they approached the flame, the relic in Zach's hand began to pulse with an otherworldly energy. He could feel the power of the jinn growing stronger, as though the relic itself was resisting destruction. "We have to hurry," Amir urged, his voice tense. But as they moved closer, the ground beneath them trembled, and a voice, deep and menacing, echoed through the valley. "You cannot destroy it," the voice hissed. "I am the key. I am the gateway. I am eternal." The group froze. A dark figure appeared before them, rising from the shadows, a jinn more powerful than any they had faced before, its form shrouded in smoke and fire. "The final battle. You think you can end me?" The jinn's voice rumbled, shaking the very earth beneath their feet. "You cannot destroy the key without destroying yourselves." Without warning, the jinn lunged toward them, its fiery claws reaching for Zach, who held the relic tightly in his hands. Faye stepped forward, reciting the Quranic verses they had memorized during their previous battles, but the jinn's power was overwhelming. The flame in the temple began to flicker as the jinn grew stronger, feeding off the relic's energy. "We need to use the relic," Zach shouted. "It's the only way." With a deep breath, Zach raised the relic above his head, focusing all his energy on the task ahead. The group joined him, their voices united as they recited powerful prayers to fortify their resolve. The jinn roared in fury, but the relic began to glow with an intense light, radiating purity and power. Suddenly, the temple flame erupted, casting a brilliant light across the valley. The jinn screamed in agony as the fire consumed it, and with a final cry, the creature disintegrated into nothingness. The relic's power waned, and Zach, his hands shaking, threw the object into the flames. The fire roared higher, and the relic was consumed in an instant. The temple grew silent. The weight that had hung over them for so long lifted, and the oppressive darkness dissipated. A new dawn. Exhausted but relieved, the group left the valley as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. The world felt different, cleaner, freer, as though the veil between the seen and unseen had been lifted. Sheikh Ahmed had been right. They had destroyed the key, and with it, the gateway that had threatened to unleash chaos. But Zach, Amir, Nora, and Faye knew that their journey was a testament to the strength of their faith, their unity, and their trust in Allah. As they returned to their everyday lives, they vowed to keep their experiences close to their hearts, knowing that the unseen world would always be there, lurking just beyond the veil. But they had proven, once and for all, that no darkness could overpower the light of faith. The Whispering Ruins, Part 6. It had been a year since the destruction of the key and the defeat of the jinn that had sought to break through the seals of the unseen world. Zach, Amir, Nora, and Faye had returned to their normal lives, each of them growing stronger in their faith and more determined to live with purpose. But the shadow of their past adventures still lingered. The group had not spoken much about their experiences in the Sacred Valley, the final battle with the jinn, or the destruction of the relic. The weight of those memories was something they carried in silence, knowing that their lives had changed forever. They had faced unimaginable evil and had emerged victorious, but at what cost? A mysterious letter. One evening, as Zach sat in his apartment studying, he received a mysterious letter. The envelope was plain, with no return address, and the paper inside was smooth and cold to the touch. He opened it carefully, his eyes scanning the cryptic message written in elegant script. The veil is thinning. The door has not been sealed. The words chilled him to the bone. He read them again, then called Amir, Nora, and Faye to meet. When they gathered in the same place later that night, he showed them the letter. "This can't be a coincidence," Nora said, her brow furrowed. "We destroyed the key. The seals should be secure now." "Perhaps we didn't finish the job," Amir said quietly, his tone filled with doubt. "What if the relic we destroyed wasn't the only source of the jinn's power?" Faye looked concerned. "I don't want to go back there. I've had enough of those dark places." Zach hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I know. But if something's wrong, we can't ignore it. We have to go back and finish this for good." The unearthed secrets. The group returned to the ruins of Kudum Haveli. The jungle had taken over once again, and the house was barely visible through the thick vines and overgrowth. The memories of their previous encounters flooded their minds as they stepped cautiously inside. The air was heavy, and every sound seemed amplified in the silence. "We need to find out what this letter means," Zach said. His voice tense. They made their way to the underground chamber where the relic had once been kept. The air was colder here, and they noticed something strange. The symbols on the walls had faded, as though time itself was erasing their presence. But there was a lingering darkness, a presence that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. Suddenly, Amir stopped in his tracks. "Look at this." He pointed to the floor, where the remnants of the seal were barely visible, crumbling away. There was a faint crack in the stone, as though the ground itself was breaking apart. "It's as if something's trying to escape," Nora said, fear creeping into her voice. They knelt beside the crack, and Faye felt the temperature drop around them. A low rumble echoed through the chamber, as though something deep within the earth was stirring. Without warning, the ground split open, revealing a dark abyss below. The return of the darkness. From the depths of the abyss, a shadow emerged, taller and more menacing than anything they had encountered before. Its eyes burned with an otherworldly fire, and its form shimmered with an aura of darkness. "You have sealed nothing," the voice of the jinn boomed, its tone deep and sinister. "You were fools to think the door would remain closed forever. The key was only one piece of the puzzle. Now, the time has come for the true force to rise." The figure loomed before them, its presence suffocating. This was not a jinn they had ever faced before. This was something older, something far more powerful, an ancient force waiting to break free. Faye took a deep breath. "We can't let it out. We must stop it now, no matter what." Zach nodded. "We're not running this time. We'll finish this." The final seal. The group quickly took their positions, reciting the same verses that had helped them before. They gathered their strength, but the jinn fought back with fierce power, throwing shadows and winds that threatened to tear them apart. "We need to use everything we have," Amir shouted over the chaos. "We have to reinforce the seal." Nora's hand trembled as she held the bottle of Ruqya-infused water. "It's the only way," she whispered. With determination, they began chanting louder, focusing their will on the seal that had once held the darkness at bay. But the jinn was relentless, pushing back with every ounce of its strength. It seemed like all hope was lost when suddenly, the ground beneath them cracked open wider. The shadowy figure reached out, its claws aimed at the group. But then, something incredible happened. From deep within their hearts, a light surged, their combined faith, their bond as a group, and their unwavering trust in Allah formed a barrier of light that pushed back the darkness. The jinn screamed in fury, but the power of their prayers was too much. In a brilliant flash of light, the shadow disintegrated. The ground trembled one final time before everything fell still. A new beginning. The group stood, breathless and shaken, as the darkness faded and the light filled the chamber. The crack in the ground sealed itself, and the symbols on the walls began to glow once more, stronger than ever. The presence of the jinn was gone. "It's over," Zack said, his voice filled with relief. "We did it. The door is sealed for good." Faye looked around, the weight of their journey finally sinking in. "We've faced things we never thought possible. But in the end, it's our faith that carried us through." Amir nodded. "We're stronger now, but we also know that we must always be vigilant." As they left the ruins behind, the first rays of dawn broke through the trees. They didn't know what the future would hold, but they knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, with unwavering faith and the strength to stand against the unseen world. The Whispering Ruins, Part 7. The aftermath of their final confrontation with the jinn had left an indelible mark on Zack, Amir, Nora, and Faye. Though the immediate threat had been vanquished, a new sense of unease lingered in the air. The group's bond had grown stronger through the trials they faced, but they now understood something far more profound. The battle between light and darkness was eternal. And they had merely witnessed a fragment of it. A strange occurrence. Several months had passed since the sealing of the jinn. The group had returned to their daily routines, but one evening, as Zack was reviewing his notes in his room, he received an unexpected visitor. A man in dark clothing stood at his door, his face hidden by the shadow of his hood. "Can I help you?" Zack asked, his voice wary. The man stepped forward slowly, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling calmness. "I have a message for you," he said cryptically. "It's not over." Before Zack could respond, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Stunned, Zack quickly shut the door and rushed to meet with Amir, Nora, and Faye. He told them of the mysterious visitor, and the ominous words hung heavily in the room. "This feels wrong," Nora said, a shiver running down her spine. "We've already faced enough darkness. What more could there be?" Faye, always the logical one, shook her head. "There must be an explanation. Maybe it's someone playing games, trying to frighten us." But Zack, who had never fully recovered from the weight of their past experiences, felt a deeper chill. "No, I feel like this is a warning. The hidden truth." The next morning, Zack received another letter. This time, it was even more cryptic than before. It simply read, "The veil is thinning. The balance is in jeopardy. The guardians will rise. Beware the forgotten one." The words made no sense to him. Who were the guardians? And what did the forgotten one mean? Unable to shake the unease building inside him, Zack called his friends together. They decided to return to the one place that had been the source of all their trials, the ruins of Kudum Haveli. They needed to uncover the truth behind these warnings and ensure that no new threat was looming. The return to the ruins. The jungle had grown wilder since their last visit, and as they approached the ruins of Kudum Haveli, a sense of foreboding hung thick in the air. The house, once a place of fear and darkness, now seemed eerily calm, almost too calm. "We're not alone," Amir muttered as he scanned the surroundings. They entered the house once more, this time with more caution than ever. As they descended into the underground chamber, they noticed something different. The walls, once glowing faintly, were now completely dark, and the symbols were gone. The place felt empty. "I don't like this," Faye said, her voice tight with anxiety. "It's as if something has erased everything we did here." Zach's eyes narrowed. "We need to find the source. Whatever is happening, it's linked to this place." A hidden chamber. After hours of searching through the house, they uncovered a hidden door at the far end of the underground chamber. Behind it, they discovered a small, dusty room. In the center stood a pedestal, upon which lay an old book. It looked ancient, its pages worn, the cover covered in dust and cobwebs. Nora gingerly picked up the book. As she opened it, she found that the text inside was written in a language none of them recognized, though the symbols seemed familiar. She flipped through the pages, and as she did, her hand stopped at a passage that was written in Arabic. "This," she whispered, reading aloud, "the forgotten one is the key to the gate. When the veil thins, he will awaken, and with him, the shadows will rise again." The words sent a chill down their spines. Zach stepped forward. "The Forgotten One. Is this what we've been warned about? Is this what we've been preparing for?" Faye looked at the book's pages, her mind racing. The Forgotten One, could it be another jinn? Or something worse? Amir's face was grim. "It seems like we've only just scratched the surface. This book might hold the answers we need." The Awakening of the Forgotten One. As the group continued to study the book, the air around them began to grow colder. Suddenly, the floor beneath them began to shake, and a deep, guttural sound echoed through the chamber. "Something's happening," Nora cried out. "The seals, they're breaking." The ground cracked open beneath them, revealing an abyss filled with swirling darkness. From the depths, a dark figure began to rise, a shadow far larger and more powerful than any they had seen before. The Forgotten One. This being was not like the jinn they had previously encountered. It exuded an aura of sheer malevolence, and its form seemed to flicker between the physical and ethereal, like a ghost trying to manifest into the material world. "You thought you had sealed the darkness," the Forgotten One's voice boomed, "but the veil is only temporary. I am eternal. The balance between the worlds is mine to command." The group drew close to one another, hearts racing. The jinn was more powerful than any they had encountered before, and this time, the stakes were higher. But this time, they were ready. The final confrontation. As the Forgotten One's form loomed over them, the group began to chant the verses of the Quran that had served them in the past. The power of their collective faith formed a barrier of light, but the Forgotten One resisted, pushing against the light with a malevolent force. "We need to use the relic again," Zach shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "The flame, just like before." Nora nodded, and together they focused their energy on the relic they had destroyed so long ago. The book in her hand began to glow, and the energy they had once used to seal the darkness began to return. They recited the words from the book, the ancient language now clear in their minds. With a final, powerful prayer, the group sent a surge of light at the Forgotten One. The jinn screamed as the light enveloped it, and with a blinding flash, it was sealed back into the abyss. The ground trembled one last time before everything fell silent. The aftermath. Breathing heavily, the group looked around. The chamber had returned to its peaceful state, the darkness gone. The book had turned to ash in Nora's hands, its purpose fulfilled. The veil between the worlds had been restored. As they left the ruins of Kudum Haveli for the last time, they knew their mission was finally complete. The Forgotten One had been sealed away, and the balance between the realms had been preserved. But deep down, they understood that the unseen world was vast, and the fight between light and darkness would never truly end. They had faced the Forgotten One and won, but there would always be more challenges to come. Together, they walked into the future, stronger than ever, knowing that no matter what happened, they would always stand united. The Whispering Ruins, Part 8, the final chapter. It had been 2 years since the final battle with the Forgotten One. Zach, Amir, Nora, and Faye had gone their separate ways, each having moved on with their lives, but the bonds they had formed during their trials were unbreakable. Though the unseen world had grown quiet once more, the memories of their past journeys still echoed in their minds, like the whispers of the wind through the trees. They had sealed away the darkness, and for a time, there had been peace. But in their hearts, each of them knew that the balance was fragile. They had learned that the unseen world was always lurking, waiting for the veil to thin again. The return of the veil. It began with a feeling, a sense of unease that gnawed at their hearts. Small, inexplicable occurrences began to happen in their lives. Shadows flickered at the edge of their vision, and dreams of vast, endless darkness plagued their nights. Something was stirring once more, but this time, they couldn't ignore it. Zach, who had been the most reluctant to confront the darkness in the past, felt the pull first. One night, as he sat at his desk, a whisper, so faint it could have been imagined, reached his ears. "The veil is thinning, again." Startled, Zach grabbed his phone and immediately called Amir, Nora, and Faye. Within an hour, they gathered at his apartment, each of them bearing their own burden of unsettling dreams and feelings of impending danger. "I can't shake it," Faye said, her voice quiet with concern. "It's like something is watching us. Waiting. We've been here before," Nora added, looking at the others. "And we know what this means. We can't run from it," Amir said, his face set with determination. "Whatever's coming, we face it together." Zach nodded. "We've sealed it before, and we'll do it again. But we need to be ready for anything." The ruins once more. The group made their way back to the ruins of Kudum Haveli. As they approached, a sense of dread filled the air. The once ominous house now seemed to pulse with a dark energy, as though it had been waiting for their return. "This doesn't feel right," Zach murmured, his eyes scanning the ruins. "It's as if the house itself is alive." The air grew thick with tension as they ventured inside. They reached the underground chamber, but this time, the symbols that had once glowed with light had turned black, their edges frayed as though torn by an unseen hand. "Something's trying to break through," Nora said, her voice shaking. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them. The crack they had sealed all those months ago began to widen once more, and from the depths, a familiar voice echoed. "You cannot destroy what is eternal." The Forgotten One had returned. The final reckoning. The figure rose from the abyss, more terrifying than before. Its form seemed to ripple between worlds, shifting in and out of existence. It was no longer just a djinn, it was something far darker, a force that sought to break the boundaries between the seen and the unseen. "You thought you could seal me away forever," the Forgotten One's voice boomed, "but I am eternal. The veil is my domain. We won't let you destroy the balance," Zach shouted, stepping forward, his voice filled with defiance. "We've faced you before. We'll face you again." The Forgotten One laughed, a hollow, echoing sound that reverberated through the chamber. "You cannot win. The balance has always been in my favor." But this time, they were prepared. The knowledge they had gained from their previous battles gave them strength. They gathered their energy, each of them focused on the task ahead. Faye held the ancient book in her hands, the pages now completely blank. She whispered a prayer, her voice steady. "We may not have the relic, but we have our faith." Amir raised his hands, the words of the Quran flowing from his lips. The light that had once banished the darkness began to form once more, this time stronger, brighter. Zack stood firm, his heart filled with resolve. We will not let you return. Not now, not ever. The Forgotten One roared in fury as the light around the group grew brighter, its power intensifying. They poured everything they had into the light, their collective strength creating a barrier strong enough to shatter the darkness. But the Forgotten One was no ordinary enemy. With a final, bone-shaking scream, it lunged at them, trying to break through the light. The ground cracked open beneath their feet, and the chamber shook violently. As the jinn reached out, a flash of pure, blinding light erupted from the group, overwhelming the Forgotten One. The force was too great. The jinn screamed one final time before being consumed by the light. In that moment, everything went silent. The last seal. When the light finally faded, the group stood, panting, in the center of the chamber. The ruins of Kudum Haveli were still and silent, the crack in the ground sealed once more. We did it, Faye whispered, her voice filled with awe. Amir looked around, his face filled with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. For now. But we know what's out there. We know there will always be a struggle between light and darkness. Zack nodded, his heart heavy but resolute. We've sealed it, but the unseen world is vast. There will always be challenges. But we'll face them. Together. The four of them walked out of the ruins for the last time, the first rays of dawn breaking through the thick jungle canopy. They had won. They had sealed the darkness once and for all. But deep inside, they knew the truth. The veil between worlds would always be thin, and the shadows would always be waiting. But with their faith, their unity, and their unbreakable bond, they would always stand ready. The Guardians of the Unseen World. Epilogue. Years passed, and the world continued to turn. Zack, Amir, Nora, and Faye each lived their lives, continuing to grow in their faith and understanding of the world around them. They never forgot the trials they had faced together, and though their paths had diverged, they remained united in their hearts. They knew that the fight between light and darkness would never end. But as long as they stood together, they would always be ready to face whatever came next. And the whispers of the ruins, once a haunting memory, became a distant echo, fading into the past. The unseen world had been sealed, for now.